premiere date for his podcast. I'm interested in it.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
Seth's just going to continue to tease it until we never.
They're going to have like 100 episodes and like drop them all at once.
Yeah.
Doing like the Aphex Twin SoundCloud drop.
Exactly. Alrighty. Y'all ready?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 391 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Michael O'Malley,
Nazeeh.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we're going to be continuing our romance series with 1993's Poetic Justice. Yeah. If you would like to see the rest, we got the rest of the schedule up at cinematary.com, so check it out. You can also listen back to our previous 2 episodes on Dirty Dancing and When Harry Met Sally. So,
do we have a retraction we need to make regarding last week's discussion of When Harry Met Sally?
What? No, we talked about everything. I think we covered it all.
That is a joke for one person in the audience.
Don't spill your wine, buddy. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump in the movies that we saw this week, and I think this is the movie I'm most excited to talk about out of the entire program today, and that is the latest Steven Soderbergh, which is enough for me to be excied. But Kimi,
he's been on a hot streak,
dude,
past like 10 years or something. Like it's just been nothing but hits.
Dude, the guy's just hitting home runs right now, man.
Yeah. Let me ask a question before we get deep into Kimi.
Yeah.
I'm the only person on the podcast who had. Oh no, Nazeeh, you said you haven't seen Kimi either.
I have not.
I think I said this. I don't remember if it was on mic or off mic when we talked about He Got Game. My take on Steven Soderbergh recently has been like he exclusively makes 3-star movies. Like they're all good, but none of them have wowed me. Would I have my mind changed by this movie?
This is very much like, so you know how in like the early 2010s he did a bunch of like genre riffs like Side Effects and Haywire and stuff like that. This is kind of in that mode where he's like definitely doing like a type of movie, like kind of dipping his toe into a particular genre and kind of infusing it with his own like visual and like editing proclivities. But it's not like a movie that is intended to be like a great like artistic statement in like a grand like Apocalypse Now version. It's just like it's just a banger.
Yeah, it's super fun. I mean, it's blow up, but with COVID and modern technology.
Yeah, which means it's also like Rear Window and stuff like that too. So it's all good.
I mean, there's your description. I can go through the plot line, but I mean that's what it is. But yeah, this one, it stars Zoe Kravitz, as well as I'm trying to think, not too many other recognizable people. I mean, Rita Wilson.
Erica Christensen makes an appearance.
Erica Christensen as well. But Zoe Kravitz, she stars as like this. So in this it's taking place during the like the beginning of the COVID pandemic. She lives in Seattle. She works for this company that it's similar to like Alexa or Siri, but the difference is rather than just being an AI that just functions on its own, it has like this human component. And so the job that she does, she like culls through any of these kind of irregularities or stuff that like kind of people flag from this little hub thing, and clears up what the issue is and moves on. So one day she comes across this violent crime that she notices that's flagged in the system, and she's trying to like figure out who do I give this to like have due process follow. And unbeknownst to her, this crime is something that was perpetrated by the head of the company that she works for. And so she's not finding much help in terms of like getting this into the hands of the proper authorities. It's also worth mentioning that she's agoraphobic. She doesn't like want to, she's trying not to leave her apartment. The only time she leaves is when she's like, all right, I got to bring this information to the person and give it to them in their hands. So you also have that facet to it. Zoe Kravitz, I thought, just fantastic in this. I mean, I'm trying to I'm relatively, I love Zoe Kravitz, but at the same time I'm a little hit or miss. I don't ever feel like she's been given like material to really kind of work with. Probably the best thing I've seen her in is the series the remake of High Fidelity. I am excited to see her in the Batman because that's the plot I'm interested in the Batman movie. But I think this might be the best role that she's gotten in terms of like a movie. She really kind of chews this up. But Soderbergh also, he ditches a lot of his like cell phone cam, handy cam, like way of filming that he's done on a lot of recent stuff. This is a little
no fisheye lenses in this one.
Yeah, this is a lot more traditional. But like he ditches all that stuff, but then has way more fun with just, he gets way more into his editing and way more into like how he's just positioning things. Like I think I saw somebody share it on Twitter, but there's this incredible shot where she's like exited this building and these two guys are following her, and it's like they have this like zoom in to the two guys exiting the building, like looking for her, and then it zooms out and there's like this brick wall and Zoe Kravitz is like running behind it, and it's like, it's not that like, it's just a really like very fun shot, and like that's what the majority of this movie is. It's just incredibly creative, but in a kind of playful way. The script is from David Koepp, who has worked with Spielberg a lot. He wrote like Jurassic Park and things like that. And so you kind of have like this blockbustery Spielberg screenwriter with like the playful creativity of like late period Steven Soderbergh. And I don't know, it's not something that again is like reinventing the wheel, but I think like this is kind of like these mid-budget, these are the mid-budget movies that honestly I'm kind of pissed that I had to watch this on HBO Max instead of like in a movie theater, because this would have been such a fucking fun movie to watch in a movie theater. But Michael, what did you think of Kimi?
I thought it was really good. I co-sign everything you've said. And just to go back to Zoe Kravitz, like I think one of the things that's really fun about her performance is that a lot of her performance that I think makes it really fun and interesting is that it's not a really writerly actor performance, right? A lot of her acting that like forms her character is her mannerisms and her physicality in the screen. Because a lot of, especially the early parts of this movie, she doesn't have a ton of dialogue, right? She might talk to someone on like a video chat for like 30 seconds or something like that. But a lot of it is her walking around her apartment, looking out her window, going to her computer. And she builds a character out of that rather than, I mean, there's lines of dialogue to give context to her character, but so much of the early goings of this movie is kind of just her movie in which like her acting role is what is creating the person in front of us. And I think that's really fun to watch her do. She's really good in it as this person with agoraphobia, which I will say, like, this is an extremely zeitgeisty movie, which maybe will make people irritated with it if they're going with the wrong attitude. Like, you of course have like the COVID stuff, and which like wraps into like the agoraphobia that she has, which was present before COVID, and COVID has like exacerbated. You also have like once she leaves the building, there's like protests going on. In the case of this, it's like a series of protests and counter protests surrounding, I think, like first housing for the homeless or something like that.
Something like that.
And you also have like the whole like I don't know if people are paying attention to this, but like there was that like spate of incidents at protests in 2020 where like vans came and just like grabbed people. Like that appears in this movie. You of course also have the like surveillance capitalism sort of thing that Soderbergh's been interested in for a while, but like kind of like shows how like the pandemic has empowered that sort of thing to a scale not previously seen. So it's like a very contemporary movie, but I also felt like, unlike a lot of other like COVID era media that I've seen, it didn't feel like it was cashing in on those things necessarily. It was cool that those were always tied to very traditional storytelling beats and character beats, right? It's not like, hey, we've got a movie set in COVID, so people are wearing masks. It's like the COVID element like creates very specific tensions within this character, and creates very like set pieces and stuff that's like really interesting and could only have been done under those contexts. You have like again like there's a very interesting like it's kind of like the paranoid thriller trope of like you're running away, like our protagonist is running away from nefarious like men in black, and they duck through a parade to like escape them or something. Like that's like a big trope. But in this time, she like ducks into the protest, and so again, like it doesn't necessarily feel shoehorned in a cheap way like it could have. Like I think it's really cool like how contemporary it is while also still just functioning narratively as a movie. Like in some ways, a very conventionally drawn movie that is just really well done.
Yeah, well, and I think to that point as well. Like I've seen a couple. So like a couple weeks ago, I saw the COVID movie with James McAvoy and Sharon Hogan called Together, where it's literally about like them in lockdown, and like the whole movie is about them and their son in lockdown, and it's so infatuated with like the tropes of COVID. They're like cooking stuff. They're talking about like different mask policies. Like it's kind of just capitalizing it, like you said, capitalizing on like that zeitgeist stuff. And this one, it just kind of feels like a natural part of the world. Like, I mean, this is just, like she, again, like it's like you said, it just kind of informs her character. Her character wouldn't be in the predicament she's in really, in any other way, in any other type of situation. Like COVID kind of perpetuates that. They talk a little bit about that the agoraphobia was definitely something that was something she was dealing with before, but like you said, COVID kind of accelerated that and added this other dimension to it that has left her kind of in the state that we find her in the movie. And so in terms of movies that deal with COVID, I think this is probably one of the better ones because it treats it as just part of the world rather than let's get into the zeitgeist and talk about stuff that people relate to.
I wonder what Soderbergh was thinking, like in regards to that stuff, as like when COVID was hitting, Contagion being like the movie that people went to talk about it. Like, I wonder if that was an intentional, like, let's rework the pandemic idea into a movie thing for him.
It could be. I mean, I don't know how much it's always tough for me to know, like with Soderbergh, because in some ways he's like a journeyman director who like just works with scripts from other people almost exclusively. So I don't know how much he worked with David Koepp with this, and this may have just been like serendipity that they came together. But I do think one thing that's interesting about this movie's context within COVID is the moment in COVID that it is describing. So it's not the beginning of the pandemic with lockdown. It's like in the months following all the lockdowns letting up, in which people were beginning to return to like some semblance of like what they assumed would be like their every like normal life. And so attention within the movie is she's not coming out of her apartment at the same time everyone else is starting to come out. And so there's a lot of conversations that she has where people are like, you're just going to have to come out of your apartment sometime, and do this. And it's very clever because like on the one hand, it's about like her mental health with like just her agoraphobia and like all of the stuff that's wrapped up in that. But in another way, it's like a sly commentary on like that moment in which there was tension socially regarding, are you going to join people who are starting to come out of like self-isolation, or are you going to continue to isolate out of like concerns over like where we are in the pandemic? And I think that's like kind of an interesting thing that I've not seen a lot of movies delve into, is that kind of like the moment in which COVID life started to become normalized, and therefore people started to like feel more comfortable in it. What would that mean for people who don't feel comfortable in it? So anyway, I think it's good. I'm kind of maybe intellectualizing some of the stuff, but honestly, this is just a fun movie. Like it's the sort of movie, like you said, Zach, sort of movie that would have been great in a movie theater, and if crowds would have seen it, it would have been great to see with an audience.
Yeah, like that's the biggest thing with it is I know that Soderbergh's working, has been working with like Netflix and HBO Max now, and has like been putting his movies out there. But yeah, this one even more than his last few, like desperately should have been in a movie theater, because it would have been really fun. And like I said, like it's a real banger. Like it's just a really fun movie. It's like an hour and a half. It moves quick. And it's just kind of like, again, like having that pairing of David Koepp and Soderbergh kept being like this Spielberg guy, like having those sensibilities with Soderbergh is just really, to me, is just really fun because Soderbergh kind of like knows how to operate in that world like Spielberg, but also has like these very like specific tendencies that he pulls on his own, which makes him much more fascinating. I mean, he's somebody who can make the Ocean's trilogy, but then make something like whatever that, I forgot what the name is of the We Should All Talk, or what, the Meryl Streep movie, you know, like
Let Them All Talk.
Let them all talk.
Yeah, that movie was great.
You know, and so like I just kind of like that, you know, you put somebody who's made like Jurassic Park and Ready Player One and like these big budget blockbuster movies with Spielberg with Soderbergh. Like that's just super fun. So if you got HBO Max, definitely check out Kimi. I think it's, like I said, it's been my favorite thing of like the 2022 movies that I've seen, just because I think it's just it's a good movie. It's a good time at the movies, you know, or on your couch.
Probably on your couch.
Speaking of stuff that's not really a good time at the movies. Well, I mean, I don't know about quality, but I wouldn't classify this as a good time.
This movie is horrifying in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's say the name of the movie though.
Yeah, Red Rocket. It's the latest from Sean Baker, who I'm sure people have become familiar with Tangerine, which we talked about on the podcast, as well as the Florida Project. Real quickly, this one, it follows Mikey. He's a ex-porn star who is left Los Angeles and comes back home to his hometown of Texas City, Texas, and kind of weeds his way in with his wife and his mother-in-law. And then it just kind of follows him as he does
praise on people.
He just kind of preys on people. Yeah, he just kind of just exploits all of these different types of people, and also strikes up this relationship with a 17, soon to be 18-year-old who works at a donut shop that he goes to. I know Nazeeh and Michael, you guys have seen this. Anybody kind of want to talk a little bit about their feelings on Red Rocket?
I'll let Nazeeh go, since we just yacked about Kimi a long time.
Yeah.
So I love Sean Baker a lot. I'm a pretty big fan of his, like, all the movies I've seen. Starlet's really good. It's another movie that deals with someone who works in pornography, although it's much kinder and softer than this movie. But yeah, this movie, like when I saw it initially, I thought it looked really, really lovely. It's shot on 16 millimeter, and Sean Baker is like a huge champion of like shooting on film and projecting on film, and his relationship to like film culture it's funny to watch it shift between Florida Project and now, because he's been like a Letterboxd user, and like
and
that it's just.
But his Letterboxd reviews are almost exclusively where he saw the movie. He like
and it'll
writes
get like
down the
2,000
theater
likes,
that he watched it at.
Yeah, and like he's like a very, I don't know, like he's gone on record talking about how like people on Letterboxd are mean to him, you know, and how like he had to like put something in his bio about, you know, how like he's just here to like discuss film or whatever, yada yada yada. I really appreciate that he's really, really good at like scumbag cinema, right? And him personally, I just feel I find it, I like the contrast of like, I guess his personal like style and the characters he chooses to like depict in his movies. And so with Red Rocket, the more I thought about it, the more I really, really enjoyed it. It's like I guess I like, part of the reason I'm getting into like his perception as like a more personal capacity with the film world is that like this is easily like his most, like these are his most reprehensible characters doing the most reprehensible things, I think, in his whole like filmography. And I'm just like, I'm sitting there just like, God damn. but like when it settled, yeah, I thought it was fucking great. It looks great. The characters are incredibly watchable. I'll say that.
Yeah,
I do want to talk about how it looks because like I've spent a not inconsiderable time in East Texas, like Texas City. I have relatives who live there, in Houston and stuff like that. And I will say, like in terms of the look, like this movie nails East Texas.
It
Like
does.
to a T. Like honestly, like maybe the ugliest part of the United States, and it makes it just so filmable. Like
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's like swampland, like lit by these giant industrial, like petroleum and gas towers. Like it is like landscape that has been totally like just wrecked by like Exxon and stuff like that, you know, or DuPont. And it's just like it smells bad, it looks bad, and it looks amazing in this movie. Like it is such a like the texture of that place is just like completely encapsulated by this movie. And I think for whatever other misgivings I have about the movie, which I do, like that part is like awesome. And I don't know, I don't even know if there's many movies that depict this element of Texas, but it got it for sure.
Yeah.
What I was picking up from the conversation before we started recording is that Michael and Zach do not like this movie, though.
Oh, I do.
I'm curious, when is the other shoe going to drop here?
I'm kind of like, I don't really know how I feel about the movie because yeah, on one hand, it does look great. Like you have these scenes where, you know, just take the description of East Texas, especially this part of East Texas that Michael just gave, and you can kind of just plaster that on the Simon Rex character in this because he's also somebody who just like he so much stuff has been like, you know, taken out of him that he's just kind of a husk that's just kind of bellowing there also. But you also have these sequences where like he's riding a bike down the road and you have like the giant, you know, petroleum, like you just have the gas and the smoke and everything. And there's something kind of like quietly like Koenigsegg type beautiful about it that you're just like, what
it
is
looks
going
almost
on here?
sci-fi, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like if you think about like I don't know, like this is a weird reference, but like the beginning of the like J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie where like Captain Kirk is just like riding around in like the American heartland, but like on the horizon there's like these really futuristic like spaceports and stuff like that. It kind of has that feeling to it, which is really surreal. The like mix between like, you know, dirt roads and that sort of thing, and then like high industry is really interesting.
Yeah, but at the same time, like we said, like this character, he spends the entire damn movie just preying on people and just exploiting those people, and like
specifically grooming not a minor in Texas, but a minor in Tennessee would be in Tennessee.
Yeah,
which is my point.
Including, you know, multiple graphic sex scenes with her that you're just like after like the third or fourth one, you're like, okay, we get it. And like, I don't know, like it's one of those like, oh well, it's just kind of this tough character that you're supposed to sit with, but it kind of also has like this simmering below the surface Trump's America kind of, because
it's barely below the surface. Like Trump is on TV constantly. Like,
is it it's a 2016 like
it's 2016
it's not, he's not the president yet.
It's when he's running and
and I don't think he ever lands, or again, more maybe I don't know what he's trying to get at with it. It's more he just kind of uses Trump as a trampoline to kind of portray these types of people.
It's just like, I don't know, like I like the movie. Like overall I'm positive about the movie, but my positivity is a mix between me feeling really, really like extremely positive towards some things. Like I think Simon Rex is really good in this movie.
He's very good,
the person who plays Strawberry, like the 17-year-old, she's really good in this movie.
Susanna Sun is her name.
Yes.
She's great.
She's really good. The landscape is great. Like honestly, like on a screenplay level, this movie is really interesting because it's really propulsive and interesting. But then you have like stuff that doesn't work very well for me, like the Trump stuff. Like it feels, I don't know, maybe this is uncharitable, but it feels very like surface level, like hashtag resistance sort of stuff, where it's like Trump sure is exploiting these people, just like industry has exploited these people, and just like Simon Rex is exploiting these people. Like, I don't know, maybe there's something deeper going on there, but it didn't seem like that insightful to me. And I guess if you're gonna like invoke something as iconic as like Donald Trump, like Make America Great Again 2016, I would like to see something that I haven't read in like a Slate article or something. And I didn't feel like this movie transcended it on that level. Circling back around to the sex scenes as well, I was very, very, very uncomfortable with those because it's like the actress is 20-something years old, but she's meant to portray a teenager, and I don't know, that's just weird. Like, I don't know. I know different people probably feel different ways about that, but like I'm watching what I wrote this on my Letterboxd review. I'm watching what, if were it to happen in the state of Tennessee where I live, would be considered a statutory rape, like multiple times over the course of the movie. And I don't know. That's weird. Her character is really interesting. Like, he's trying to groom her, but she's also very clearly like aware of what he's doing, and she's trying to like kind of use him as leverage to like get out of her current situation in like as like, you know, someone who's like at the tail end of high school and has not a lot of prospects. And I think that's kind of interesting.
She is, but then at the same time, like he never. It's so stuck on him that you're never really given an opportunity to let her kind of like explore that to a degree. It's very much fixated on him.
Question about the sex scenes. So there's like a recurring discourse on Twitter that like pops off every like 2 or 3 months or so about like the extent to which sex scenes are necessary in cinema. And like the hardline stance is like, no, they're never necessary. You can just imply the characters have sex and move on. I tend to agree with the opposite side, which is that like sex scenes can tell us a lot about the characters and can like affect plot dynamics, and also can kind of affect the sensual experience as a film goer, right? I'm wondering if there's any sort of like justification you can imagine in Sean Baker's head for why he would like let those play out so many times.
I think so. I mean, one of the
makes you hate him more, like hate Simon Rex's character more.
Oh
yeah. There's also the one in which they make a sex tape, right? And he's like teaching her like porn, like how to be a porn star. Like it's not like without narrative justification if you want to go there. But I also think that, like, I don't know, like I said, I think different people are going to feel differently, and maybe this is just a personal thing, but for me, I was kind of miserable watching, like, and I know that's the point, right? Like, this is like how you're supposed to feel if you're a good human being. Like, it was kind of miserable to watch like a teenager being groomed into the adult film industry when she is looking to do other things, presumably. Like, that's not like her ambition, right? Like, she's clearly being manipulated by this person. And the sex scenes, like, are sometimes interesting in that context, and other times it just feels like I'm being invited to partake in this exploitation, right? And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. Like, uncomfortable doesn't mean it was bad, but I was uncomfortable.
So, it's hard to like, it's hard to give like a perspective or like to lean one way or another about things that isn't like preachy or like, I guess like offensive in a way that isn't like I guess empathetic. And Sean Baker, I feel like, goes to great lengths to portray people like empathetically who are very unsympathetic, like on the surface. Do we think maybe like the sex scenes are so graphic as a way to like present a comment on the trajectory that leads like very young, impressionable girls to like this type of industry? Because like you run the risk of, if you criticize sex work or the sex industry, that you're criticizing like the people who perform in it or the people who take it. But you can criticize something and like not think like it doesn't need to be in society, right? But like you criticize it in a way to like improve it or improve the lives or conditions of the people in it. And so I would never think that Sean Baker is like sex negative or he's like criticizing anybody in sex work. But there are lots of issues with the porn industry. The dynamic between Simon Rex and Susanna Sun is like, if not the most popular, one of the most popular like categories in pornography, right? Like it's being overwhelmingly made, like because that is what people like gravitate to when it comes to like pornography.
Right, like barely legal or whatever.
Yeah. Like it's very much like the standard, right? And so clearly this content has an audience, and it's like, how comfortable are we like wrestling with how much we enjoy it? But we usually enjoy it in private.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I wouldn't accuse the movie of being like anti-sex or anything. Andrew is in the context of I guess this is part of how I don't know how I feel about the movie, because I know how I'm reacting to these things and feeling so like uncomfortable, while also kind of recognizing like, okay, here's the point he's making, while also at the same time in my head flipping around and thinking like, well, like what's the value of the point that he's making? Like in the end, like I come out of a movie seeing like a person having like attempted to prey on like a teenager to coerce her into the like adult film industry, while also being shown his shortcomings. Like I don't know, like I mean, it intersects like a lot of the discourse around like problematic protagonists, right? Like going all the way back to like whatever Taxi Driver, or like all that sort of stuff. And those are always hard conversations to have, because there's like two competing things going on. There's like intent, and like the like philosophical like reasons for things happening, and then there's also like how those philosophical things are manifested in the movie. And occasionally like there can be a disconnect between those things, and I'm not sure if there's a disconnect here. And I saw this movie a month or two ago, and I'm still trying to sort out in my head like, where do I think this movie lands in terms of, I understand the intent, and it makes sense to me, and I can like work through why some of the decisions were made. But then when it comes to like the on-screen like presentation of those ideas, like I'm wrestling through it. And it may just simply be that maybe I'm not as interested in the subject matter as he thinks I am. Maybe it's like I was talking about with the Trump stuff, where it's like maybe I'm wrestling for some deeper meaning that's not there, and like it's simply just about like, hey, these are how people become exploited, and I maybe think that I'm looking for some like deeper rationale than that, and that's like I can't get past that.
It's also interesting, not to completely spoil the ending, but he also ends this not as explicitly in fantasy mode as like Florida Project, but also kind of in fantasy mode type thing. Like that whole like that ending is very much evoking like the kind of, it hangs in there, like it just kind of it's a hanging ending.
I actually really like the last act of this movie. I think that you start seeing like the chickens coming home to roost for the characters, and it is like riveting, I think.
But I don't know. It's definitely one that I've been like wrestling with, and I don't know. It's. I think I favored the other two of his recent ones more than this, but at the same time, like I mentioned, like Simon Rex his character's detestable, but he's very good in this movie. But yeah, Red Rocket, it's streaming, or not streaming like on a streaming service, but you can rent it in places like that. I'm sure it'll be streaming soon. It's A24, so
if you're interested in like Sean Baker's like overall project as a filmmaker, like the use of non-professional actors, or the use of like underseen locales in movies, like the use of like
lots of sweet zooms.
Yeah, there is a lot of really good zooms in this. If you're already bought into like his like proclivities as a director, like I think this is an interesting like wrinkle within like his broader career, and I would recommend seeing it on that metric. And as much as I'm still wrestling through some of the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's toss it over to another, stand-up director, and Nazeeh, I'm going to toss it over to you to talk about some Kurosawa.
Okay. Kagemusha by Kurosawa. I just read this. I didn't realize it shared the Palme d'Or that year with All That Jazz, which I have not seen, but I hear is very, very good.
Fantastic.
So I think this is a really, really good movie. It takes place in feudal Japan. I also just recently read this. Kagemusha is the Japanese term for political decoy, literally meaning shadow warrior. Well, first off, who here has seen it?
I
have actually not seen this one.
Not seen Kagemusha.
It's on the list.
Yeah. No, it's very good. It's very, very well made. It's I guess I should give like a brief synopsis. It's set in the Sengoku period of Japanese history and tells the story of a lower class criminal who is taught to impersonate a dying daimyo to dissuade the opposing lords from attacking the newly vulnerable clan. I feel like if he hadn't made Ran, this would be a lot more favorable to me, but I mostly view this as like a very, very good like precursor to Ran. Ran is very similar. Have you guys seen Ran?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Like I think Ran is fantastic. Like it's an easy masterpiece. It's so good in like every area. And this movie is also very, very good in all the ways that Ran is. I just think not as good. The story with the two clans is like it's very, very plot heavy. It's like a full 3 hours. I feel like it could have been cut. Personally, like I wasn't as invested in all of the like individual pieces, but the set design is like very iconic for a good reason. It's incredible. It's like just they're like during these dream sequences of the main character, and they're very nightmarish. And Andrew, you mentioned this earlier, not on purpose, but big Qui-Gon vibes with the set design. Very spooky, very, very colorful. I love there's always like the transition from black and white to color with directors who are around for both. And yeah, I love how like Kurosawa leaned the fuck in to color, which again he would like embellish in Ran. So yeah, those are like my primary feelings. It's just like it's like for any other director, like it would be like a high like point in their career, but for Kurosawa, it's not a minor work by him, but not one of my favorites. But I think it is very, very good. So
I saw it years ago, and all I remember are the colors and set design. I've not seen Ran, so I remember that standing out. It was like, this movie looks cool.
Yeah,
it's been one on my list because it also like this one even more than like Ran feels like he just like really leaned in on the color, and it almost goes to like this like there's screenshots of it that I've seen that just look like it's like in a music video for a metal band. Like he just goes hard, and you're just like, hell yeah, man! Like this looks awesome. It's been sitting on my Criterion Channel queue forever. I need to just like I've been waiting to like set aside a Saturday or something and just there and watch it.
Kurosawa's got kind of like the same issue that like Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg had, which is that at a certain point in his career, he forgot how to make movies that were not 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's one of the reasons I've not seen Ran either, is because that movie's pretty long. But I remember this movie really moving. Like, this is a fast movie. So.
Yeah.
That's funny. I like very much felt the length.
You?
Yeah. I don't know why. Because like Ran flies by. Like I wouldn't take a minute away from Ran, and I'm very like I hate any movie over 90 minutes unless it's like really, really good. But yeah.
I wonder if I saw Ran first before I had seen this movie, if I would have felt the same way. Because it's kind of, I guess, weird to have seen this movie and not Ran, because Ran is like far and away the more like memorable, or at least like the more iconic and famous movie.
Speaking of feeling the length on late Kurosawa movies, I've seen Ran twice, and the first time I watched it, I was bored to stone by it. And then I watched it again with my Shakespeare class last year after we had just read King Lear, and it was gripping. So like that's my rec when you do get around to watching Ran, Michael, like maybe refresh yourself on King Lear, because like the way in which the Kurosawa kind of interpolates it is really interesting.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that you were doing that, and I didn't even recognize or realize that it was meant to be a Lear adaptation.
Oh yeah.
For whatever reason, that has never been on my radar. But so step one to enjoying Ran, get your teaching license, Step 2.
Read the longest Shakespeare play, or one of the longest Shakespeare plays.
Done. All right, Andrew, you're gonna take us home.
Yeah, I will be brief. I have a bit of a retraction to make because I believe, I don't remember if it was on our top 10 of the year episode or an episode.
I think it was the top 10 when we were talking about the new Dune.
So we were talking about Denis Villeneuve's Dune, and I mentioned that, you know, since the release of Dilly Villeneuve.
Dilly Villeneuve.
Since the release of Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Wow, that is a lot of syllables that all sound alike. People have been reassessing David Lynch's Dune and saying that it's good, actually. And I said, no, don't do that. David Lynch's Dune is horrible. And I sincerely believed this. I watched this with Michael, by the way, several years ago when I was finishing the David Lynch filmography. And we were just like in agony watching this movie. It made zero sense. It was often not great to look at. It was 3 hours. I was so lost. I felt betrayed by David Lynch. And also, like, he had taken his name off of it. At the end, it said directed by Alan Smithy. I mean, I was kind of vindicated in my dislike of it because, like, oh, David Lynch doesn't like it either. But I need to eat my words because I rewatched David Lynch's Dune, both after watching the Villeneuve movie, and I watched it with a friend of mine who is really into the book Dune and just finished the book Dune. And was able to kind of like answer questions I had along the way. And I actually found myself enjoying it quite a lot. And I think I would have been able to understand the broad strokes of it, even if I didn't have like a Sherpa explaining it to me as I went through, specifically because I had seen the Villeneuve movie. And I said this when we talked about the Villeneuve movie, but I think that the greatest strength that movie has going for it is the way that it kind of doles out information very carefully to the audience. Like, Dune is a story that, you know, the book has a glossary and an appendix and stuff like that. Like, there's so many proper nouns and like interlocking plots and subplots that it's very easy to get lost. And the Villeneuve movie, like, it gives you just enough information in each scene to understand the next scene. And it kind of like leads you on a bit of a breadcrumb trail in that way. And the David Lynch Dune does the opposite, where like it opens with a character like fading in, like you're looking at space, and then the character's face fades in over space, and they just kind of talk at you for like somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes, and it's just like all proper noun, proper noun, proper noun. And so like that is what find your bearings again. But like once you do have the conflict of this movie, who are all these houses, how do they relate to each other, what is like ultimately at stake here, it's actually like fairly easy to follow. You just have to like have a bit of background going in. And I know this is not true for you, Michael, because like you had read the book in the past and still struggled with it. But I also should say that like there are 2 cuts of the movie. And one reason
that's good.
Why I struggled so much with the first time I watched it is that did I drop out or something?
Yeah, you keep freezing up.
You've been freezing up, but it's very entertaining.
Oh no. Okay, well, my audio is recording, so you can fix it whenever.
For the YouTube people, it's a real treat. Let me tell you.
Okay. Enjoy, YouTube people. But as I was saying, there are 2 cuts of the movie. There's a cut that's 2 hours and 15 minutes, and there's a cut that's 3 hours. And I think when Michael, you and I sat down to watch the movie, we watched the longer cut because we'll
never know.
Like, watch the longer cut because that's probably the one the director likes. That is not the case. David Lynch, off the 3-hour cut because the 3-hour cut is like really tough to get through. I think the
why does it freeze on like the part when you need
version
to hear what he's saying? Okay.
Sorry, you're throwing me off talking.
No, sorry. Like every time you say something that I feel like it needs to fill in the blank, it's like you freeze. I'm like, oh damn! Like, what was he gonna say? Oh, all
right. Man,
Andrew, would you
point that I was making? The point that I was making. Sorry, and then I'll take your question, Michael. I think David Lynch made the 2 hour 17-minute version. Like he edited that down, even though he wasn't super. Like made him put more stuff in. Like he had all this footage laying around, and I guess they thought that maybe if you put more footage in it, it would make more sense. That is not the case. It just felt like a bigger desert to get lost in. But I think that the 2 hour 17-minute version like goes by much more swiftly, and it probably does better with like doling out information as well. It's just kind of like night and day. I didn't like love it, but compared to my first time, which was like, again, just I felt like it was unwatchable. It felt like a new movie to me. But what was your question, Michael?
My question is, so you began like saying like people are reevaluating this movie and that it's good actually, and you're giving like not a glowing review, but a moderately positive one. Like, is it positive enough that I should rewatch it? Or is it something that I can just be like, maybe I was wrong, but I'll never know?
I think you should save it for a rainy day when you feel curious to open that box of maybe pain again.
I will say I read the David Lynch autobiography that came out a few years ago, and apparently, according to him, his original cut was 4 hours long. So he found, I guess, a happy medium with that 2 hour 15.
Right. They spent so the Villeneuve movie is like half of the novel, right? And he's going to make a part 2 that the second half of the novel, and the Lynch movie spends like the first 90 minutes or maybe hour 45 minutes just on the stuff that's in the Villeneuve movie, and I'm like, what are we going to do with the whole second movie? And the friend of mine who was watching with me who had read the books said that he actually did a pretty good job capturing the second half of the story in a very brief amount of time. But I imagine that the 4 hour cut was like a lot more of that, a lot more like battle stuff. I don't know.
I didn't know about the 3 hour cut. I had heard about Lynch's Dune for years. I thought it was going to be fucking awful. I only watched it because of Villeneuve's Dune. Villeneuve's Dune is fine. It's super well made. I didn't care about any of the characters, especially Timothée Chalamet. Maybe it's because like I just find Kyle MacLachlan so much more appealing as
my god, I could not disagree more with this point. So like I love Kyle MacLachlan. Like I have so much love in my heart for Kyle MacLachlan. He is so miscast in this movie. Like he's the thing that keeps me from really liking it. Like
okay, here's why it's perfect. It's his acting debut, and he's portraying like a really like young, naive like character. Like I think it's such a fitting like a role for him.
But he looks like a 30-year-old man like the whole time.
Okay, that I give to you, but I guess like the newness of him as an actor like is what really sold it for me. And I just really, really like watching him, and I thought he worked super well as for the character, way more than Chalamet. Like Chalamet like looks he's 27 forever.
I think that Chalamet does a really good job with the role. Like when he's just sitting around like watching videos about sandworms, it does feel like a kid doing his homework. Whereas with Kyle MacLachlan, when he's watching a video about sandworms, I feel like he's an actor waiting for his co-stars to walk in the room and start talking to him. You know, like it just feels very stiff and forced to me. And it sucks because he's the main character. He's in most of the scenes. I guess I was more taken with kind of the set dressing and the stuff around Kyle MacLachlan, and also like the special effects that Lynch brings in to evoke some of the psychedelic aspects of the story, which Villeneuve mostly ignored. Yeah,
I like that. I will say, like Lynch, like the book Dune is very weird, and Villeneuve is like classes it up for like kind of mainstream audience, but Lynch is keyed into that weirdness in the book.
Yeah, that's what I like about his. Like he disavowed it so much. I thought it would be like fucking boring, like complete studio interference. And when I finished it, I'm like, okay, this is clearly compromised, clearly like Lynch didn't have Final Cut, but it's still very strange. Like the overlays and like the way he cuts it are like as unsettling as like not as, but like it's definitely like Lynch's unsettling kind of style. I thought it would like, I just thought it was like completely sanitized of his style, but you could still very much see the vision. And I loved the way the fucking what the armor looked. I think like the way.
Oh, you're talking about when they go into like invincibility mode and start fighting. They look like Minecraft characters.
Yeah, it's very hilarious. I love the way it looks.
Yeah, there is like a camp appeal to it as well. Like there are parts of it where I'm more laughing at it than laughing with it, but that's entertainment value too. I just enjoyed my time with it a lot more this time.
Well, I believe it's available, so again, we'll be waiting to see if Michael reassesses it at some point. So
yeah,
we'll just wait for that.
Don't hold your breath.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be back talking about Poetic Justice after this.
I'm sad. Sad I couldn't talk about Bad Luck Banging just to make sure everyone knew I wasn't sex negative.
Oh yeah, maybe you can remedy that next time.
No, yeah, you're good. No, I think your points were good.
Dealt with COVID.
I didn't mean to come across that way if I did.
Oh no. I was just because I felt just like you guys. Like when I was watching, I'm like, geez, these scenes, man, like they're very intense, and I like wasn't sure of like their include. Like I wasn't sure of the justification of their inclusion, and I was just trying to like that was just like a scenario where like they made sense.
Right. Yeah. No, I thought you had good points. And it's like a movie that's super interesting to talk about, which is why I'm glad we got to talk about it because I didn't have anyone to talk about it with.
No, same.
I came home and my wife Rebecca was like, "How's the movie?" I was like, "I'm not sure," but then like she hadn't seen the movie, so I couldn't talk about the movie with her. So.
Also, like describing it to somebody like I feel like doesn't necessarily help the movie. It makes it sound like less appealing to watch.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it is a very watchable. Like, yeah, we probably undersold. Like, it is very like propulsive and fun in a way. Like, not fun to watch what the character is doing, but it's like seat of your pants kind of movie.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's.
Did Andrew freeze again? Okay.
No, Andrew, you had one freeze where like you were making a point and your finger was up and you were like,
"Oh no!"
It was great.
Freeze again,
and you could have made it your like
yeah, it was great. Like it
was prime meme material,
and it was just funny because you kept like you would be like, and David Lynch, he did this really interesting thing where, and so we're like, well, what's the fucking interesting thing? Like.
Damn. It's raining pretty hard at my house. I don't know if that's affecting my internet.
Oh, that's possible.
Yeah. I don't know. I was entertained by it, but I mean, I understand how it takes away from the experience of the podcast or the video stream.
Man,
you got a bit of an editing job ahead of you.
Yeah.
I would love to see Lynch's 4-hour cut because I was actually sad when the movie ended. I was like, damn, I wish there was more. I don't know if the 3-hour cut would help because he didn't like if he didn't edit it at the point. But
one thing that I didn't have time or didn't think to get into is like how the ending of Dune is kind of like. From what I understand, immediately complicated by the second movie. Am I frozen again?
You said the thing about Dune.
I was like,
yeah, the thing about the ending of Dune is
this doing a joke on us? Is this like a bit? Like I feel like
this would be very well orchestrated if so.
Yeah, because it feels like a bit. It's like okay. Like it's just specifically whenever he like is about to make the point and go, oh, all right, let's hear, and then it's no.
I'd like to think. I don't think Andrew would be so disruptive to
No, it's somebody else. It's a
right, yeah.
It's a deeper force. Before Andrew gets back, Michael, I don't know. Have you seen this show on Netflix called Hilda? Oh, you're on mute.
No, what is that?
I just found it recently. It's super good though. It scratches kind of that Adventure Time itch, but it also it
Oh
has like
wait, I didn't realize you were talking about the animated one. Yeah, I've heard of it.
yeah.
Someone was telling me about it. Is it the one?
Oh, interesting.
That's not the one that like the Vampire Weekend guy was involved in, is it?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
What are we talking about?
This
Hilda.
Netflix show Hilda. No, I've
No,
watched. I'm like halfway through the second season right now, but like as an animation thing, I think you would dig it because the animation's great. It's like this. It's like a mix between like an ambient indie Nintendo Switch game and a little bit of Ghibli, but also it has like that Adventure Time itch to it as well.
Yeah.
Super good though, but it's like 2 seasons and then it has like a movie. But it's good.
Yeah.
But it has like it's like hand drawn, like classic, nice animation.
Yeah. Still searching for something to fill that Adventure Time hole in my life.
I think you'll like this one. I think you'll like this one then because I've been enjoying it. It's been good. I think there's like another season coming and that's it, which is kind of
nice.
sad.
Yeah.
But it's good.
I'll check it out.
Is he frozen?
Andrew, blink once if you're frozen. If you're not frozen.
Damn it.
Yeah, he's super frozen. Right
Yeah, he's mad frozen. Iceman level.
Damn.
Caveman.
But no. I think you would like it because I was watching. I was like, Michael would like this as a fan of like just like classic hand drawn animation.
Yeah. It weirdly like television is like the last bastion of that. And it's weird because like historically television animation has been terrible, like Hanna-Barbera and stuff.
Well, and it has like this like kind of unique mythology to it. It's kind of like it's a little bit Norse mythology, a little bit just kind of basic fairy tale mythology, but like the designs of the creatures and stuff, like it has this one creature in like the first episode that looks like the Colossus from like the one of the Colossi from Shadow of the Colossus. Cool. It just has like this really cool like these really neat designs to the different creatures and mythical figures in the show that also makes it very unique. So
I need to get that. we recently got HBO because of some like deal with our cell phone service or whatever. I'm kind of like flooded with content right now.
Sorting
through like
HBO is really good. I mean,
HBO Max has good stuff.
Yeah,
yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Short
on original animation though. HBO's got to get on that game.
Well, they have like a whole deal with Adult Swim, and they have like all their shit.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have like
I saw that. So like anyway.
I've heard we'll get to the thing, but I've heard Primal, is that the show? Or it's an animated show that's like really highly like rated on HBO Max.
Okay.
Oh
yeah, I see this.
Yes. I've heard very good things about it. So as far as animation, maybe you could watch that. It has it's like very, very acclaimed, but I have not seen it.
Okay. Let's seek it out.
Are you good, Andrew?
I am now connected to my cell phone hotspot. Hopefully that'll be better than what was going on before. But
is this still part of your ongoing trouble with your ISP?
No, my ISP has been very stable for a long time. I'm really shocked that I got dropped today.
Huh.
But if it keeps happening, I will probably. Am I glitchy right now?
A little bit. I mean, we can
much
hear
better
you.
than before. Yeah,
we can hear.
Also,
you.
It seems like there's a bit of a delay as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a delay to the audio video.
That sucks. If it's really bad, I may just drop out and let y'all take it. Mostly because I didn't really like Poetic Justice, and I feel bad about contributing nothing of substance to the conversation other than I thought it was boring and not very romantic. But we'll try.
All right.
He's just
we'll kick you out if
it's all right, we'll go ahead and start so that we can get it going. All right, in 3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 391 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be continuing our romance series with 1993's Poetic Justice. Written and directed by John Singleton, the film stars Janet Jackson, Tupac Shakur, Tyra Farrell, and Regina King. Still grieving after the murder of her boyfriend, hairdresser Justice writes poetry to deal with the pain of her loss. Unable to get to Oakland to attend a convention because of her broken down car, Justice gets a lift with her friend Aisha,
It's Aisha.
and Aisha's postal worker boyfriend Chicago. Along for the ride is Chicago's co-worker Lucky, to whom Justice grows closer with after some initial problems. But is she really opening her heart again? After the success of Boys in the Hood, Singleton signed a 3-year contract with Columbia Pictures, and as of early May 1991, he was writing Poetic Justice with the goal of finishing by that summer. Singleton was inspired to write the screenplay after considering the impact of murder in the black male community and the ways in which it affected girlfriends and families. The script is reportedly based on actual events, and he intended to write his own poetry for the film, but instead chose the poems of Maya Angelou, whose words influenced his own life. Singleton had written the role of Justice with Janet Jackson in mind. After striking up a friendship with the singer, Singleton asked her opinion of his screenplay and surprised her by offering her the lead role. Singleton wanted Jackson to gain 10 pounds to change her appearance and asked her to watch Italian neo-realist films, quote, to convince her that she didn't have to be glamorous in this role.
Fire.
Singleton discussed the 20th anniversary of the film in 2013. He's in the interview, he mentioned that in 1993, black female leads were rare, and he wanted to give a voice to young African-American women. He also revealed whose idea it was for Janet Jackson to wear the now iconic box braids, saying, quote, that was a collaboration between myself, Janet, dance choreographer Fatima Robinson, and a dancer named Josie Harris. Josie had the braids in Michael Jackson's Remember the Time video. I brought her and Fatima and a couple of other dancers over to hang out with Janet, and they all became friends. And I said, why don't we try and do Janet's hair like Josie's hair? We got the hairstyle from Harlem and just put it in a West Coast movie. Jada Pinkett, Lisa Bonet, Monica Calhoun, and many other popular actresses auditioned for the role of Justice, though Singleton knew from the script's draft the role was solely intended for Janet Jackson. Ice Cube was offered the lead role of Lucky, but turned it down, stating that he was not at a point in his career that he wanted to play in a lead role in romantic movies. When the film opened in July of 1983, Cineplex Odeon initially decided not to release the film at its Hollywood theater due to fear of violence. Rita Walters called the decision racist, and they agreed to delay the release until July. Around the country, 5 violent incidents occurred around theaters during the film's opening weekend, including a homicide outside a Las Vegas theater.
Wait, oh my gosh, what about the movie is inciting violence?
I'll let you connect the dots on that one.
Good Lord.
I mean,
you just said that violent incidents actually happened. So what happened?
Hype around Boys in the Hood, falling into the next movie. I don't know.
No.
In 1993, Variety said John Singleton's follow-up to Boys in the Hood and the screen debut of Janet Jackson cannot sustain the scrutiny and expectation that inevitably follows a conspicuous first film. Poetic Justice is a hermetic inner-city love story elevated by resonant social commentary. It has an obvious appeal to a core ethnic audience, but faces a challenge tapping into the mainstream.
Wow.
In 1983, the New York Times said Poetic Justice is a mess, but it's an adventurous one. It's a movie whose unrealized ambitions are in many ways more interesting than the goals achieved by the success of Mr. Singleton's first film, which endeared him to the Hollywood establishment. In 1993, Roger Ebert said Boys in the Hood was one of the most powerful and influential films of its time. In 1991, Poetic Justice is not its equal, but does not aspire to be. It is a softer, gentler film, more of a romance than a commentary on social conditions. Janet Jackson provides a lovable center for it, and by the time it's over, we can see more clearly how Boys presented only part of the South Central reality. As you can tell, there were definitely a specific type of film reviewer in 1993 major establishments. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Poetic Justice. Michael, let's start with you.
I liked it okay. I feel like of those reviews that you mentioned, the one that I'm connecting most with is the New York Times one that kind of calls the movie like unsuccessful as a cohesive whole, but has a lot of interesting like little ambitions that it's trying to do that I thought were kind of neat. So like, not to out Andrew, but I know he's not a fan of this, and part of that is because he doesn't really buy the central romance. And I'm kind of in that camp where I don't know that the romance 100% works. I don't know, like it's doing this like it happened one night thing where it puts two people who are bickering at the beginning of a road trip, and by the end of the road trip, they've realized that they have affection for one another. And I can understand the dynamic at the beginning of the road trip. I can understand theoretically the dynamic at the end of the road trip, and I'm not sure that the movie does a great job of connecting the character beats to get to that ending. That said, I really enjoy the like individual beats of this movie that are really interesting and kind of tangential to the romance. Like the opening is like it's like 20 or 30 minutes where they're just in LA and we're getting to know the characters, and I think that that's all really interesting. The Italian neorealist lens, like that Singleton had for Janet Jackson, that makes sense to me. I didn't know that watching it, but it has that sort of like we're just kind of like filmmaking that is halfway as interested in the environment itself as it is in the characters. And I think that is true throughout the movie. There's like once they get on the road trip, they stop at a few different locations, and the sole justification for stopping at these locations seems to be like, we thought it would be cool to film a scene in this location. And locations not necessarily being like geographic locations, but like cultural locations, right? Like there's this one moment where they're at like an African heritage festival that I think like just is a really interesting texture that I liked a lot. There's another scene in which they're at like probably the best scene in the movie is when they're at like they like crash a barbecue, like a family reunion barbecue, like a black family reunion, and kind of presumed to be like cousins or whatever. And I just think they're just like hanging out at this family reunion and like intersecting these different family dynamics. And I just found it like really interesting and lived in and fun. I can't weave together a character arc for some of these characters. I see what they're trying to do with the characters. It just doesn't work. Like these little individual like episodic things don't string together like like a romance with an arc for me. But individual pieces I think are really strong in this movie.
Nazeeh, what about you?
So that's actually a pretty appropriate segue for my feelings. It is not an overall like strong work and everything does not work well. But I'm quite high on what did work. And Michael, like you were saying with you know, the lived in stuff, as like a portrait of, you know, like black social life in the 90s, like I think it's very, very strong. I think Regina King's character is so well realized, and like she's absolutely like a type of person that like everybody like has met before.
Oh, can I jet in one time? Like, I think my favorite moment with her is where they stop at the gas station and outside, Tupac is like talking to this trucker about like, you think Garth Brooks is slapping or whatever, and then inside she's like complaining that they don't have like the same drinks as like in the like central LA gas stations they would go to, and like I think that's like a really fun moment with her where she's like just kind of yelling at the gas station, and then she ends up getting like fruit juice and like I don't remember
water
what
guns.
Yeah, and she like drinks half of the fruit juice and like pours the rest in, and she's just like sipping on this like gas station fruit juice for like the rest of the movie. I really like that. Sorry, go ahead, Nazeeh.
Yeah, I feel like when characters are allowed to just kind of interact, and I wouldn't be surprised if like there was a certain amount of like improvisation in this movie with like the back and forth. I feel like when it's like weaker is when the characters are like clearly like performing like a plot point, right? Like, you know, there's like a lot of the scene, the soul scene with Tupac, and you're introduced to his baby mother and like her situation and what she's like, and that scene's like pretty messy, like stylistically. There's like a lot of shouting. It's not very it's a kind of a vague, thin kind of like archetype, I guess, for for like that type of character.
Yeah, like the strung out single mother, black single mother.
Yeah, and like, it's that is not like a very compelling or like engaging kind of depiction, but like the more specific stuff where they're just kind of like vibing off of one another. I enjoyed all of that, and yeah, I guess like the plot just gets in the way.
Mm-hmm. So my thought in response to a lot of what you guys just said is that it seems like what the movie wants to do, what the movie is trying to do, is present characters who are kind of stuck in one particular type of environment, an environment that's like very like struck by poverty, and like the people in that environment are kind of facing a lot of like psychological distress as a result of that. And so like everybody's kind of antagonistic towards each other in ways that they wouldn't be if they were more like financially stable. And then allowing those characters to have some sort of semblance of peace and happiness when they're on the road away from that. And then they're on, and in those kind of more quiet and like, I don't know, more enjoyable locales, they're able to kind of share feelings and experiences with one another, and eventually a romance blooms. But I just don't think that either one of those things are particularly well done. The whole idea of like people living in dire straits being extremely stressed out and antagonistic towards each other, I feel like is kind of vaguely and thinly done, like you said, Nazeeh. And I'm teaching Lorraine Hansberry's Raising the Sun right now, which I think is like exhibit A on like how to do that really well. Like the first scene in that play is like just family members at each other's throats for no particular reason because they're really stressed out about other stuff. And then like the fourth or fifth scene of the play is those same characters kind of like playfully teasing one another, saying a lot of the same things they would say in scene one, but now doing it in kind of like a loving, jovial tone because they got money in the interim between those two scenes. But like it feels very like thin, hollow, like let's just kind of throw a bunch of stereotypes on screen and make these people scream at each other for most of the movie. And then by the time the romance happens, for me, it's just kind of too little too late. Like I do admit I was texting Michael for a little while. I was watching this movie. And part of my text was like, when are these people going to have a conversation? Like, when is Janet Jackson going to actually meet Tupac's character? Because it was like 45 minutes into the movie and they had not even left for the road trip yet. They had one conversation where he hits on her, and then they're kind of off doing their own thing for the rest of the time.
I will say that scene is very, very good.
I do like that scene. I like that scene a lot.
The tension and the way they like build the joke up to Tupac, like I thought, like very spicy. You could feel it. You could pout.
Yeah, and they're towing a line of appropriateness that kind of reminds me of some of the things we talked about with the Shah Rukh Khan series last year. That makes for very engaging drama. But most of the time they are together on the road trip. It's just like Tupac yelling at Janet Jackson and calling her a fucking bitch. And like, how many times do I need to hear Tupac call Janet Jackson a fucking bitch? Right? Like it's the whole like, will they, won't they, we're bickering like rivals turned lovers thing. It just feels like it's not that like fleshed out or well written to me.
I agree with you. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just going to say that, like, When Harry Met Sally is another interesting comparison point because, like, those characters go through, like, many interpolations of what their relationship and / friendship even is. And you kind of, like, feel a lot of the dynamic shifts in how these characters feel about one another. And you can tell when they hate each other as well. But, like, the hatred they express for each other is just, like, so much more interesting, I feel like, than Tupac calling Janet Jackson a fucking bitch. And once their hatred for one another transitions into like friendship / romance, it's like one conversation. They have one conversation where like Tupac kind of reveals he like is a bit vulnerable and reveals some trauma he's experienced, as does she. And then it kind of like just we're supposed to buy that they're in a romantic relationship from there. Like, I get that part of the appeal of Tupac as a rapper is that he's like this very hardened macho figure who is not afraid to kind of bare his soul and talk about the more emotional side of his life. But that doesn't really feel like it comes across in this movie to me. And I also don't think, like, just in terms of how I conceptualize how relationships work, just because you can be emotionally vulnerable with someone, you can share that form of intimacy, doesn't necessarily translates to I want to have a romantic relationship with this person. Like, I didn't feel a romance happening at the center of this movie, and then all of a sudden they're together at the end, and I'm like, where was the romance? I thought this was a romance movie.
I want to propose like what I would imagine would be like the intended like effect that I don't think is achieved. Like I already said, like I don't think the romance connects the dots from beginning to end. But like, so here's what I think is like the imagined effects or imagined like arc of the movie. Like if you were to like sit the John Singleton down, and maybe this is incorrect. So John Singleton can haunt me from the grave if I'm wrong. So I feel like at the beginning of the movie, Andrew, you talk about like the kind of shared trauma of living in like inner city poverty, right? And the especially shared trauma of like specifically like an African American community with like the history of violence and history of like oppression and all that sort of stuff. And as a result, you have, like you mentioned, Andrew, you have characters who are aggressive and even abusive toward one another. And over the course of the road trip, I think what we're supposed to see is by taking people out of the specifics of their like environment that they've grown so accustomed to and presenting them with like more positive iterations of Black community, I think that they're supposed to start seeing a sort of solidarity among each other because of that trauma rather than like using that trauma to attack each other as they are at the beginning of the movie. And then by having shared trauma, you can have like a shared intimacy with one another that then grows into like a recognition of like each other as people, right? Because at the beginning of the road trip, like Tupac is like extremely misogynist, like not just like in the kind of like colloquial, like, you know, using bitch or whatever, but like he like says all women are the same because they all just bleed once a month, right? Like that's like reducing women down to that. Like, and I think like he is like hypothetically, he's supposed to recognize the personhood of Janet Jackson as they go, and in doing so, recognize how to truly love a woman. I think Janet Jackson is like in a similar situation with Tupac, where she has not necessarily dehumanized him, but she's like really trying to work through her grief at her previous boyfriend being killed and trying to process that through her relationship with Tupac. And Tupac is also trying to process his feelings about women by proxy of the like kind of stereotyped like welfare queen, like strung out on drugs, like single mother, like that is his ex, and that he has to like, you know, take their kid away from or whatever. Like, and I think by the end of the movie, it's less like When Harry Met Sally romance and more of like a romance in which like there is like found like mutual solidarity and mutual humanity among like between these two characters, and that intimacy becomes sexual and romantic. And I don't think the movie connects those dots, but if I had to guess like what the movie is trying to do, like that feels like what's happening, even if I don't think that it's all there.
Yeah. And I like that idea of like seeing different versions of like Black solidarity and like ways of dealing with that shared trauma. I guess I was just too like against the movie by the time that stuff finally rolled around that it didn't I don't know, like I wasn't having these like galaxy brain like, oh, I get it moments. I was just kind of irritated by the characters.
It's earlier when you were first telling us how you didn't like the movie and you initially said you didn't buy the romance. I was like, I kind of gasped and I was ready to immediately cut you off just because I was thinking about the first scene with them and how good it was. And then I thought about the rest of the movie, and that's why I stopped myself.
Right. And that scene feels like it's a totally different relationship than the rest of the movie.
That's what I was going to say. It's such a shame. It almost sets you up. Like, it almost sets you up because, like, that is, like, the most, like, kind of, like, nuanced and subtext you see from them. And that's, like, how you're introduced to both of them. You're like, oh, like, this is going to be, like, such an engaging, like, rapport between the two of them. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. I don't know if it was a result of like direction and a combination of like acting abilities, but I'm shocked that Janet Jackson didn't have like a career after this, like a bigger film career. Like, why was she not in more stuff? She was in this, and then she was in a bunch of music like films, and then like Tyler Perry movies, and like I think that's insane because she's so charming and like so enjoyable to watch on the screen, and like I feel almost feel like her character is wasted because she's like she clearly doesn't take no shit, but I feel like what she brings with like her screen presence makes it not like as stereotypical as it could have been of like, you know, like a young black woman who like stands up for herself. And yeah, I just think she's really lovely in it. I do you guys like have any idea why she hasn't been in stuff?
I mean, my guess would
maybe
just be that she didn't want to. Like, I imagine she was more focused on her music career, but I have no idea.
Yeah,
I don't know. Michael Jackson's kind of in the same boat in the sense of like he has some really interesting film roles like in The Wiz and stuff like that, and then he doesn't really capitalize on that later in his career. I mean, maybe it's just being like a superstar. I mean, Janet Jackson was like multi-platinum artist by the time this movie rolled around, and maybe she just was more interested in music. I don't know.
Now, Tupac, though, he was in a lot of movies in like the final years of his life. And he's also, I think, a great actor. Like, I especially like him in the movie Juice. And it's just, I mean, the reason that he didn't have a long career, of course, is that he was killed. But that's really sad to think about, like the great Tupac performances that we were that we didn't get to see. Right.
I do think that this is a good Tupac performance, and I think that there are scenes in which he's doing some like grade A acting. Like, I don't think this part works structurally within the movie, but when they finally get to their destination, I guess this is spoilers, and he finds that his cousin has been shot. Like the scenes immediately following that, in which he's going through grief, like he really embodies that, and I think that he sells that emotion really well, even if it's a scene that I think kind of it comes out of nowhere and doesn't really square. Like, I don't know, it structurally feels misshapen within the movie, but like him in those scenes he's completely selling it, and I think that he's great there.
I do this thing where I'm always curious of like what the main character's first line is, and his is pretty great. It's he's the mailman walking up to a house, and this homeless guy who's been asking people for change asks him for change, and he's like, I ain't got no change for you, but I got some stamps. You can send yourself a damn job application. Like that's just how we're introduced to him, and like just seeing Tupac in like a mailman's like
I did laugh when I saw him uniform. In the mailman outfit.
Fucking hilarious! Like,
I love that he's a mail. Rom-coms always have like really bizarre jobs for their characters, and they're usually kind of like boring fantasy jobs. Like, I'm a style editor at like a fictional magazine in New York or whatever, but like we need more rom-coms with mailmen. Like, that's a good good dynamic.
Everybody calls him Mr. Postman.
Yeah.
It's Tupac, and they're just like, Mr. Postman, what's going on?
and it's
There's
tough.
Also, Andrew texted me about the scene. I love it too, where he's out his buddy for not being in the Postal Workers Union.
Yes. Comrade Shakur.
I think, in terms of performances, Nazeeh, you mentioned her earlier, but Regina King as well, just like does, she's somebody who has had a very, storied career since started breaking into directing, but like this one as like the best friend to the romantic lead role, like she definitely does her own thing, in this role. I think she's really great as well as like the friend to Janet Jackson's lead character.
That's hard to do. Like, you think like the friend of the main character isn't important because they're not the main character, but I think that's what makes them harder to like cast. Because
you got to have them be good, because you're going to be entertained if the friend is as entertaining as the lead character,
right? Like, by design they're not supposed to be as memorable, right? But I just think there's like a lot of specificity that like is required for something like that, and Regina King is just really, really good at it.
I think, and this might be intellectualizing it more. But the thing about the movie that I liked is that it kind of goes, it's working within the romance narrative, but also seems to be kind of going counter it, because yeah, it's not like When Harry Met Sally, but there's also like this artificiality to When Harry Met Sally, or name a kind of rom-com in the same realm, that these characters are real, but they're also kind of not real. You kind of have like they're going from point A to point B, and they're going to change over the course of the story. And like, I don't think these characters necessarily change in the same way. I think it's tough. They're products of the environment they're coming from. I think that's what probably John Singleton is most interested in. I think Ebert kind of hits the nail a little bit when he goes, this is just another reality in South Central in the 90s. And so, yeah, you don't, you like, you hate listening to Tupac yell "fuck you, bitch" to Janet Jackson, but then she's also firing back "fuck you." Like when he kicks her out of the car, like I kind of like that, because he's yelling "fuck you" to her, and she's yelling "fuck you" to him, and the two of them are in the back going, "What the hell is going on right now?" And then you even have scenes where everybody's yelling "fuck you" to like, there's so many scenes in this movie where, specifically with Chicago, where Chicago will say "fuck you," and then Regina King will say "fuck you" to him, and then Janet Jackson will say "fuck you" to him, and then Tupac will say "fuck you" to him. And like, to me, it just feels like, it's honestly, like, I feel like these characters are more real than like a When Harry Met Sally or something like that, because they're they
like,
just,
not everybody is as like constantly clever as Billy Crystal's character.
Yeah, and like, and so like, there's something that, that's why you do go to the romantic comedy genre. Like, you want that kind of clever wordplay and stuff. I get that, but at the same time, like, these feel like real relationships that you would run into. Like, I was thinking about that going through this road trip and going, this isn't very fun, because you have just these characters who you kind of go along, and then you just immediately get into an argument. But you're, at the same time, you're like, haven't you ever been like on a road trip or something with friends? That's every most of the time, that's what happens, is people are getting in arguments about something where it doesn't erupt to this level, but I'm like, this is kind of what it's like. And like, the road trip aspect of it was interesting to me, because it's also, yeah, you have these pit stops into, I think it's a movie about spaces, because you have these pit stops into predominantly black spaces, but I think the majority of the road trip, you're in white spaces. Like, you have like that scene where Regina King breaks up with Chicago, her character breaks up with Chicago, and they have this like picturesque vista that you're looking at on the side of the road, and that's not necessarily like a setting that you would imagine to see like black characters silhouetted against. And like, it's like, and so it's kind of also like, you have this dissonance of these characters who are also kind of banging up against these spaces that don't necessarily fit what their personalities are kind of exuding. And like, I think my favorite scene of the movie is when Tupac and Janet Jackson finally kiss, because like, there's like you have this really kind of serene, beautiful setting, and it's just quiet, and like, you can kind of just feel like everybody finally exhaling a little bit. And to me, that worked, because it finally was like this exhale, because I think a lot of the movie is so charged that when you finally get these kind of small moments to exhale, you realize that, again, like, the point of the movie is, it's these characters getting out of the rolling environments that they're stuck in. And that, to me, that's what's effective most about the movie.
I think it's interesting, because I agree that like, these are characters that they don't fully embody like archetypes, or even like that kind of art style that defines a lot of, like, not just rom-coms, but like romances in general. Like, I'm looking over like the list of the movies that we're talking about in this series, and all of these characters are in some ways like kind of archetypes, and that's like by design, right? Because that's like the appeal, is these characters that are painted with really broad strokes, but can have like these kind of intimate moments that feel universal and like related to everybody. And like, this movie kind of half-heartedly gestures at that, but does, kind of gets lost in the maybe intentionally lost in the weeds of like some of the stuff that you're talking about, Zach. But like at the same time, if I'm looking at the movies on this list, like this is the only couple that has appeared mass produced on a T-shirt that I can imagine, and like maybe only second to Titanic.
Really? The
has
only
become like a kind of memed like object of like icon status, which is interesting since like the movie itself kind of eschews like that kind of romantic iconography. In like a movie like When Harry Met Sally is very self-aware in the like we are putting these people into like romantic iconography and presenting them like the friggin' poster of the movie is like these two characters just towering over the like the New York City skyline, right? Like in When Harry Met Sally, you know, to indicate like these characters are like embodying larger than life roles and they tower over the city. And that you know, I think like the image that catches on from this movie is just like Tupac and Janet just like hugging or whatever. Like that's what you see on like t-shirts and stuff. But somehow like that has become more iconic than the movies that try to be iconic in this series. And I think that that's kind of interesting that happened. You know, I didn't know a lot about this movie going in, except simply like the kind of cultural ephemera that this movie has kind of become represented by. And I was surprised at how like messy this movie is and how much it, like to Andrew's point, doesn't really embrace like completely like the like romantic side of a romance movie.
And like, and that's, I think that became apparent to me reading not just the reviews that I read, but also just the reviews I was coming across. I was just looking it up. Like I just, you know, it's a factor of like only having white men writing reviews at that period of time. But it also just kind of showed that like there wasn't a meeting at the level at the where this movie was. This movie was doing what it wanted to do. It wasn't catering to the genre. It wasn't catering to the mainstream audience. It was just kind of doing what it wanted to do. And I don't think like a lot of those critics met it at that. And I think that might be where a little bit of it kind of keeps you at a little bit of an arm's length, because it's not feeding into that traditional romance mold or rom-com mold. It's just kind of it feels like it's very much doing its own thing, whether that's effective, you know, in your opinion or not. And like to me, I guess that worked on the wavelength I was working on, because I don't know, I just appreciated that. I felt like whether or not I bought the relationship or the romance in this, I felt like I understood these characters more than I will with anybody else in this series.
Yeah. And I feel like when you have a debut like Boys in the Hood, like critics are very like unkind to your follow-up project, like, or just people in general.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not saying
they want another Boys in the Hood, you know, like that's they don't want something else. They want another of that.
Random thing to what Michael is saying. I feel like Jack and Rose are like definitely on some shirts. Like I feel like they.
I don't know if I think the most iconic image of anything we're covering is like them on the front of the boat and like him holding her, but I don't see it on the T-shirt like I see Poetic Justice.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant is like Jack and Rose, like Titanic is the other one where the couple themselves have become like iconography that has been decontextualized from their movie in some way, or like have become shorthand for their movie. But that movie aspires for those characters to become that, right? Like, you know, when you have James Cameron filming that scene with them on the front of the boat, like he's aspiring for them to be iconic. And I don't think that this movie like shows that same level of intensely trying to create like these cinematic moments that you can like will be memorably stuck in your head as like a synecdoche for the movie itself. But for some reason, like these characters have become that.
Yeah,
and it might also be because they're both celebrities in their own right outside.
Oh, right, yeah, they're also like giants in like other industries, I guess. Yeah,
that helps.
Also, I guess when a movie is kind of like maligned upon release and it develops cult status, like that is like that requires like the intentionality of whoever's claiming that like art, right? Like,
right.
so obviously like are gonna move.
There's like a whole interesting history of like movies that were reviled or not particularly liked upon release by the critical establishment or even by the culture at large. You know, they may have got, like, I think Janet got a Razzie for this movie, which the Razzies don't make sense.
Well,
but like,
they nominated Ben Affleck for The Last Duel this year, so they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah, what do you mean? That's like top 5 performances of last year. Like,
but I do think like, and I mentioned The Wiz earlier with Michael Jackson. Like, that's another movie that like had that sort of thing, but within the Black community, I think these movies hold a much different status. And you know,
I need to see The Wiz.
I think that's true of Poetic Justice as well. Is that like, I don't know if they're like cult movies so much as like the mainstream discourse of those movies was not done. Like to Zach's point, like the mainstream discourse for this movie wasn't done by the people this movie was embraced by, necessarily, or made for, yeah. And there's like all sorts of movies that were intended for Black audiences, but had mainstream releases and therefore were included in like the mainstream discussion that I think have been reclaimed by like the broader discourse as like perhaps like the people who grew up with this movie, you know, not caring about that discourse have now, you know, been given more voice.
Any final thoughts on Poetic Justice before we wrap up?
Yes, I have 2.
Yeah, go for it.
One, according to IMDb's trivia section, back to my point about improvising like lines. Like apparently, Tupac improvised a lot of his lines with Jesse, the salon owner, which is pretty cool. And that's Q-Tip at the beginning, who gets killed. Who I should have realized by his voice, but I didn't make the connection.
Also, cool. you mentioned the first meeting between Tupac and Janet Jackson is great. The whole opening sequence is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really it is.
I like the movie in a movie that we're in for a little while.
Yeah, with
reveals that it's
with the dude with like the face, like big forehead, and yes,
Billy
Billy next week.
Yeah.
No, that is good. Yeah, it was. I like that too. I like when movies do that. They shoot the seeds for the fake movie.
Well, it's funny, you know. He mentioned having her watch Italian neo-realist films. That felt very like Rossellini, like just that, like the whole setup and the editing of that sequence. It felt very like in that realm as well. So it was very good. I enjoyed the opening.
I did too. Like that's probably the most like show-offy sequence. A lot of this movie is really like laid back and lackadaisical, but that first
he directs the fuck out of it.
Yeah, man, that's like he's just like, you know, going like turning up all of his tricks, and it's great.
Yeah, the like direct POV of Tupac like staring at Janet Jackson's breasts, and then immediately followed by her eyes seeing like the gun, like terrifying.
Yeah. It's good. Andrew, any thoughts? Or just moving on.
Moving on.
Wanted
to like it a lot more than I did. I went in with high expectations. So sad that I didn't.
Oh, also one last thing. Are you guys aware of John Singleton's last movie?
What is it?
Nope.
It's called Abduction. It's from 2011, and it stars Taylor Lautner. And it was his final film.
I remember when that came out. I didn't know it was John Singleton.
I'd never heard of it. It actually has a crazy cast, like Lily Collins, Sigourney Weaver.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I just don't know how that happened, but yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Just weird.
Interesting. All right, well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary and on Twitter and Instagram at handle @Cinematary, as well as Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we list all the movies we talked about in this episode. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Cinematary. Thank you to our patrons, Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Titus Arthur, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we will be continuing this series with 1997's Titanic, which I'm not even going to put any. I'm sure you've heard of Titanic. So until next week, we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.